to the Lightning tutorial. In this episode, we're going to talk about the Rank 1 Aviation line and take a special look into John Thatch. Before we get started, there's a few things I'd like to say. First off, Lightning tutorial is going to be about making the most of your time in War Thunder, and we will also give you strats for Golden Eagles and Silver Lions, whether you have premium or not. And if you have any suggestions or pro tips, let me know in the comments below. And the second thing is, I have an open squadron to anyone that wants to join, so make sure you get in the Discord for photo shoots and events. There's plenty of people and it's a really great community for all types of games. We also have an official decal for the squadron called the Lightning Shield. Please consider liking the video and subscribing if you enjoyed it. Thank you. First up we have on the list is the P-26 pea shooter, made by Boeing. This is one of the first planes you start off with, and unlike most other countries, the pea shooter is not a biplane, but an all-metal monocoque design with wings braced by wires. The P-26 was a huge technological advancement since it was all metal and one of the first planes to ever use flaps. Not only did the P-26 serve in the US military, but also the Chinese and Philippine military. Even though the plane was outclassed by Japanese aviation in World War II, it still managed to shoot down at least one A6M2 Later, it was also exported to the Guatemalan Air Corps and retired in 1957 after 25 years of service. The P-26 is a neat little plane with even one variant having a single 50 cal that can do a lot of damage. It won't outturn any biplanes, but it will definitely rip apart anyone that gets in your sight. The next plane is the Grumman F2A, also known as the Barrel. This plane is right next to the P-26 on the tech tree and is pretty much your next go-to plane for new players. In all honesty, this is a fat half-metal biplane that can't keep up in turns with other biplanes, but the firepower on this thing is amazing. 50 cals are great, and that's definitely the strongest quality it has. Unfortunately, if you fly it in sim, you might have to guess where you're aiming since you're forced to use a telescopic sight, and that's a total nightmare. The F2A was a carrier fighter that featured a closed canopy and retractable gear. It was a huge improvement over the F2F, but unfortunately, it came at a bad time because it never saw any sort of combat and was retired in 1941. Even with all the weird quirks and being a fat half-metal biplane, it's actually pretty good in War Thunder when a skilled pilot is behind the stick. It can boom and zoom and definitely tear up some enemies with its 50 cals. Third plane we have is the OS-2U Kingfisher, made by Vought International. So I actually personally had a ton of fun reading about the Kingfisher, and I'm excited to talk about it more. The Kingfisher was a scout/naval artillery spotter. Calling it a workhorse is definitely an understatement. The Kingfisher was also one of the first production planes that uses spot welding to attach the parts, producing less drag and making it stronger. It also used the Fowler flaps that were way more effective than earlier flaps. Having the ability to be held on a ship and catapulted off to scout ahead of a fleet was a huge advantage that didn't need an aircraft carrier. The Kingfisher wasn't fast, but it was very simple and easy to fly, which was a luxury for pilots who had to fly for long periods of time. The main point of this plane was not to dogfight or be engaged. It was only good for scouting and providing information to the real fighting force that was the naval fleet. It only had two 30 cal machine guns, one facing forward and the other one in the rear. The rear seat gunner also doubled as a radio operator. Over 1,500 Kingfishers were made, most all served by the US. UK was sent 100 and Australia received 18 Kingfishers. If you're playing the Kingfisher in War Thunder, you're not looking to be the best ace, but you're there to be the best support plane for other people in dogfights, and maybe even cap a point in a naval battle. The next plane we have is the Douglas TBD-1 Devastator. This plane was one of the most advanced planes in the world, and that all changed when Japan attacked. The TBD has had one of the biggest obsolescence in aviation history. After Midway, all the TBDs were called back and immediately retired due to the catastrophic performance against the Mitsubishi A6M2 The TBD was so outclassed in Midway that they were used as a distraction and shot down with little to no loss from the Japanese planes. The Devastator wasn't always bad news for the US Navy. During the early days of the Pacific War, the TBDs from the Yorktown and Enterprise helped on the attack of Wake and Marcus Island, as well as attacking Japanese ships in New Guinea. The biggest scores the TBD got were in the Battle of the Coral Sea. The Devastator sunk a light Japanese aircraft carrier called the Shoho. But then a day later, in the same battle, the Devastator failed its mission to sink the Shokaku. A big reason that was only found out later why the Shokaku wasn't sunk is due to the fact that the Mark 13 torpedoes the Devastator used were defective. The Devastator in War Thunder is not a terrible plane. It is able to carry up to 8 bombs and has a 50 cal. It is also able to use Mark 13 torpedoes on naval maps, but unlike in the real world, the torpedoes in game are functional and will sink ships. Good hunting, naval pilots. The last plane we have in this episode is the F2A Buffalo, made by Brewster Aeronautical Corporation, and a little history about a great pilot known as John Thatch, the creator of the Thatch Weave. The F2A Buffalo was a replacement naval fighter for the F3F. Although the plane was better, it was still not much compared to the Japanese Mitsubishi Zero and the Nakajima Ki-43 Oscar. The Buffalo was also widely exported to many nations and ended up being heavily modified to perform better because of the plane's lack of power and abilities. Finland was the most successful with the Buffalo, fighting off the Russians and their early fighters mainly consisting of I-15s, I-16s, and some bombers such as the DB-3, SB-2, MBR-2. The Finnish ended up having 36 Buffalo Aces in the Winter War. Back in the US, the Buffalo acquired a new nickname after the Battle of Midway, called the Flying Coffin, due to the terrible performance compared to the Japanese planes. Now moving on to a famous Buffalo pilot. John Smith Thatch was born in 1905 and graduated in 1927 from the United States Naval Academy. He served 2 years on a battleship and then became a naval aviator around 1930. Thatch then spent about a decade being a pilot, instructor, expert aerial marksman, and around 1940, Thatch was placed in a command of the Fighting Squadron VF-3. He spent a lot of time teaching his entire squadron everything he knew. Not before long, 8 out of the 16 pilots under his leadership all became expert at aerial gunnery. Being a teacher and a tactician, Thatch knew that the Japanese planes were better in almost every way. After reading battle reports, he decided that he needed a maneuver to use when fighting against planes that are superior. He called it the beam defense position. The move later known as the Thatch Weave. Basically, the Thatch Weave is a teamwork maneuver that forces the enemy on your tail to be exposed to your teammate, after both you and your teammate turn in a sort of figure 8. The maneuver was first used in real combat in the Battle of Midway. Thatch and his squadron of F4F Wildcats were intercepted by 15 to 20 Zeros, but with plenty of practice under their belts, Thatch shot down 3 Zeros and his wingmen shot down 1, while only losing 1 F4F. The Thatch Weave was so successful, it became the standard for the US Navy and later adopted by the United States Air Force. John Thatch, after World War II, became the commander of the USS Italy during the Korean War and the USS Enterprise in 1953 to 1954. In 1958, Thatch commanded the Valley Forge. In 1960, he was promoted to Vice Admiral and served as the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations, or Air, in the Pentagon, and presided over the A-7 Corsair II development. In 1965, he became a 4-star admiral and retired in 1967. John Smith Thatch served his country as best as he could, reaching the top of the mountain as a hero, teacher, mentor, and leader. Thank you for watching part 1 of Lightning Tutorial. We only covered half of the planes in rank 1. We're going to cover the second half in part 2. I had a lot of fun writing this and learning as we go along. If there's anyone out there that would like to provide any services, just let me know. I'm in my Discord all the time. Thank you very much and have a nice day.